Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I hope you're feeling the spirit of the coming holidays, because I sure do. Ukraine is receiving a lot of good news, mostly coming from Europe, where they approved a loan that will help finance Ukraine for the next years. And additionally, there are commitments in military support as well. Beyond that, there are also bad news for Russia, such as the situation on the front line, and more importantly, the fact of the matter that Putin and the whole command of Russia still lives in the fantasy world. We are going to discuss the full situation on the front lines in just a couple of days in the frontline update this week, but there are a couple of moments I do want to touch upon. The first one is the situation around of Novopavlivka, where Russians decided that, hey, we haven't attacked this direction in military armored columns, so why don't we just do that once again? And as you can clearly hear from my intonation, it didn't really go that well for the Russians. I can show you just a couple of seconds of the footage where there was captured a column of over 10 vehicles that were advancing towards Novopavlivka direction. As you can see, they were spotted by the drones and promptly eliminated. More importantly, I want to mention the situation on the north of Dobropilya direction, where there was this salient. Well, Russia now, and specifically Russian bloggers, are stating that they are now back in control of the salient, if you look at their maps. The situation is, while Russia is attacking towards northern direction, unfortunately, it doesn't really end that well for majority of Russians whatsoever. We will see footage here where Russians were found on the front line preparing for the assault, and that assault was supposed to be ongoing, you will not believe this, on the ATVs. Yes, you heard it right. Russians prepared like a whole column of ATVs that was supposed to storm up and retake the positions from Ukrainians. Let's just say they didn't make it that far. But more importantly for us is to understand the big picture. And I always underscore that it is crucial for us to understand that Russian command is living in a completely different paradigm. They are not seeing the war as we are seeing it, because, to be honest, I truly believe that we have better information and understanding on the situation on the front line than Putin does. And this was again demonstrated by Belousov, the Russian Minister of Defense, making a presentation on the Collegium of Officers of Russia, something like this, where he once again claimed that Russians were in control of Kupiansk. But when I listened to the whole recording myself, I was just laughing my butt off, just because there is so much stuff that he said that were absolutely ridiculous. So let's dive into this parallel reality, and then you will clearly understand what I mean. Let's start with the first part.
This year, the combat potential of the Ukrainian armed forces has been reduced by 1/3. Firstly, they have lost over 103,000 various pieces of weaponry and military equipment, including approximately 5,500 of Western manufacture.
So, a couple of things that we need to note. So, what he says is that Ukrainian military capabilities this year were reduced by 1/3. So, Russia destroyed like what, 1/3 of Ukrainian military capabilities, something like this. And more than that, he's stating that they were able to destroy 100, I believe, and 3,000 pieces of military weaponry and equipment, basically vehicles, stored artillery, and so on, which is a ludicrous amount by itself. But more importantly, only 5,000 something, it was actually from Western-made equipment. And the interesting part is, wow, that's a lot of pieces of equipment. So let me get this straight. So in years prior, Ukraine was able to produce basically 98,000 pieces of equipment, actually times 3, so to say, because, to be honest, Ukraine doesn't have a lot of stocks in the last couple of years. Most of the equipment that Ukraine is using is freshly produced. And then from this production, then Russians were able to destroy essentially 1/3, so to say. And then the Allies actually donated only 5,000 pieces of equipment. Everything else, apparently more than, 20 times, was actually delivered, developed, and done by Ukraine itself. So Quite impressive, but the good part is coming right after.
The Ukrainian military-industrial complex's capacity for serial production of military goods has been reduced by almost half.
Obviously, putting all of these numbers together is a complete non-starter. There is no chance in hell that 103 pieces of equipment or vehicles have been destroyed by Ukraine. Ukraine is almost not really using a lot of equipment and weaponry, to be honest. Most of Ukrainian production is drones. So I would guess that maybe they are counting the drones that Ukraine has been launching. And potentially a lot of these drones have been intercepted by Russian tanks. I wonder if they count those as well. That would be hilarious. But this was just a start. Obviously, already we hear that numbers presented to Putin and the commanding officers of Russian military have nothing to do with reality.
Ukrainian security forces have lost approximately 500,000 military personnel.
Talking about Russia over like 3.5 years after insane condition on the front line, losing 1 million casualties, that was like a big deal, you know, like because Russia and heat waves, we all know that. We all see those videos of fields littered with Russian bodies. And in 3 years, that was finally concluded to being like over 1 million Russian casualties. Russians are like, nah, not even close. In 1 year, we destroyed over 500,000 Ukrainians. It's a complete fantasy. It has nothing to do with reality. I'm not going to even go in depth to debunking these arguments. They are all complete bullshit. It's here more to demonstrate to you what kind of nonsense is being spout forward here.
The significant border town of Volchansk has been liberated, and the establishment of a security zone is continuing in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions.
So here he talks about the situation in Vovchansk. Vovchansk, if you remember correctly, this is, firstly, he says, like, big and important town. Not big, not important, unfortunately. It's literally next door to Russia. It is a couple of kilometers from the Russian borders. This is the first town Russia entered once they tried to do their summer, or what was it, like was it summer, was it spring? I don't remember anymore. It was the early offensive towards Kharkiv region, where they were able to basically make it like a little bit in, reach the first town, and then get bogged down in that first ever town. And now by the end of the year, the general, or sorry, not the general, but the minister of defense or attack himself is now declaring, yeah, Russia strong, we captured important town of Vovchansk. I'll remind you, when they were taking this, they're stating, we're going to enter the whole North Kharkiv region, we're going to take over Kharkiv, we're going to take all over the zone and so on. Nope, they just got bogged down in the first city there ever was. But now, the best part.
The West Group of forces has taken control of the strategically important city of Kupiansk, which the enemy is now unsuccessfully attempting to regain. At present, the surrounded enemy grouping on the left bank of the Oskol River, located to the east of Kupiansk, is being eliminated.
Not only Ukrainians did not retake the town of Kupiansk, as we heard and being delivered to us by President Zelensky himself, being right there in the city, basically. Now it's actually, no, it's the Russians that are encircled Kupiansk, and it is the Ukrainians that are encircled inside the city. And actually this whole area is already also encircled, because remember, he says that forces on the other side of the river are encircled and now being destroyed. So basically he says that we control this, and now this is all encircled, and we are now taking this all and destroying everything. This is fantastic, because to be honest, even Russian propagandists have been trying to kind of, square this circle. How is it possible that Zelensky is there on Kupiansk direction, that he is presenting that all of the data is showing that it is Ukrainians that are clearing out Russian forces? So at first, they started dropping flags to the Russian forces that are encircled in Kupiansk. It worked for a little bit because this was an extortion mechanism, because Russians said, you need to take pictures inside of city of Kupiansk with the Russian flags, stating that you still control the city, and then you get resupply with food, water, and ammunition. Otherwise, you get nothing. And more importantly, they stopped doing it because now it's too dangerous, because now Ukrainians are just flying this city from all sides with drones and eliminating. So then they decided to do the second best thing possible, where they filmed the video of Russians slowly walking through Kupiansk. And here I would like to note that even some of the Western analysts bought this. For example, the Institute for Study of War, that is very well known, they've actually bought this video and say that, well, Russians apparently are still present in Kupiansk. Look how calmly they're walking. Most likely, yeah, this is a place there where that we should truly be aware of. Yet Ukrainian analysts very quickly is like, hey. Firstly, why did you just believe Russians? Second is like, we actually geolocated this footage, and the actual footage was actually done in some other city altogether. It was done in this small settlement of Tavilzhanka, which is some good 15 to 20 kilometers away from Kupiansk, far behind the Russian front lines. So no, Russians are really trying to do a lot of coping. They're trying to present that they're strong and we are defeating Ukrainians on all sides. Yet reality is that they are just lying through their teeth as always. And more importantly, it is presented on the highest possible level. And more importantly, if you would think it's like, yeah, okay, sure, he says it, but obviously no one believes him. Well, no. Because Putin then comes into his direct speech presentation where he talks about the situation in Kupiansk, and he actually says, no, Kupiansk is under our control. Ukrainians are encircled in Kupiansk, and repeating word for word the bullshit that was told to him in this commission. So this is why I always underscore that you must not listen to the Russians and believe for any sense of truth that is coming from their mouth. Everything needs to be verified with this. So be very careful when you're especially listening to what Putin is saying or what everyone is saying. More importantly, the fact that he perceives the frontline situation, which is actually relatively easy to read if you would want to read the actual maps and check your information. But more importantly, even the Russian economy and projections of future of Russia are delivered to Putin in the same bullshit lines. And that's why Putin is so confident, stating that, Europe, little pigs, that we're gonna win all of the wars and so on. The fact of the matter is, Russia is doing really freaking bad. I've been telling it for years. This year, finally, we saw the situation catching up to them. Now I believe people are kind of a little bit dismayed, mostly because of the situation within the Western societies rather than what's happening with Russia. But don't get this wrong. Situation in Russia is terrible, astonishingly bad. I'm waiting until the last meetings of this year to get some of the data on the Russian economy, and then I'm going to do a separate video. And it is absolutely devastating. There is literally everyone in Russia that is not Putin or these propagandists that are stating that it is an absolute nightmare and they're not really sure how Russia can survive. And if you want to see Russia fail indeed, then the best way to do so from our side is to support Ukrainian armed forces. And we are doing the fundraiser for that right now. So please, if you have the ability, let's try to do as much as we can. We are now almost 90,000 in for the support of Ukrainian 93rd Brigade Black Raven with the drones that they need. So let's do it. I really dream that before the New Year's we will be able to reach the point of 100,000. We have still, 10 days? No, so 12 days. So let's do it. It's going to be great. And if you're living in the United States, you can participate by, for example, purchasing yourself some sparkling wine from Ukrainian Bakhmut, and they will submit parts of their revenue to the fundraiser. It's a win-win-win solution for everyone. But let's move to the great news for Ukraine. Europe, we sort of maybe I think so did it. It's unclear. Like, so this is both ups and downs and requires a bit of explanation. So the bottom line to all of this is Ukraine is going to get funding for the next 2 years of 45 billion euros per year. This is fantastic, and this basically secures the Ukrainian needs to continue fighting this war for the next 2 years. This is fantastic. The problem is that it was not technically done by confiscating Russian assets. So a lot of people are looking at it and saying is like, well, that's not good because Europe didn't come together to confiscate the Russian assets, which would be the right thing to do. Yet the same loan is also secured by the Russian assets. So, oh my God, that's complicated. So let's kind of jump a little bit into details here. Firstly, it's interesting to know that the idea that they went with was actually the original idea that was proposed to finance Ukraine by the Europe, but it was dismissed because there were obvious vetoes from Hungary, Slovakia, and so on. Yet this was voted unanimously, including the Hungary and Slovakia and all of the other countries that said no to Ukrainian support. So we are here looking at a very interesting scenario where there's 90 billion euros is technically gonna not be a European Union loan, but it would be European Union member states that are going to be individually issuing parts of this loan, and it is guaranteed by the European Union budget that in its own right is guaranteed by the Russian frozen assets, that basically states that these frozen Russian assets are a collateral in case Russia will not pay Ukraine reparations. So if Russia pays Ukraine reparations, then Ukraine will start paying off this loan to the European Union, and then the Russians would get potentially the Russian frozen assets back, which again, not really true. So it's a very complex mechanisms with multiple layers on the idea of that's like, yes, it's technically not using Russian frozen assets, but it's fully guaranteed by the Russian frozen assets anyway. Because compared to confiscation of Russian frozen assets, that would be morally right, this is more legally right, because nothing here is technically illegal. Russian frozen assets are frozen, and we can say until which moment they are frozen. That mechanism is already in place. And issuing loan is nothing new. So Ukraine is wholeheartedly 100% is going to get the funds, and that is the only thing that matters ultimately. And in addition to that, second hit came out from the recent Ramstein-type conference meeting of the supporters of Ukraine, where Ukraine's allies agreed to transfer more than 45 billion worth of critical weapons and military material during 2026. This is, of course, taking into account all of the previous commitments and so on, but still 45 billion of commitments in military support to Ukraine is very good. It is higher than what Ukraine up to this point received this year. It is good news because it fully undermines the whole idea of Russia continuing this war. Russia is trying to play on our fears, and they're trying to use propaganda tactics to try to put the perspectives that they can fight this war forever, that they can always have all of the infinite resources, and that Ukrainians will break and they will run out of resources. By Europeans agreeing to this full, proper loan to Ukraine, this actually secures Ukraine to fight at least for the next couple of years 100%. And finally, a bit of announcement and a positive note. The Ukrainian fight drone simulator that is coming onto Steam, this game that teaches you how to fly the drone, they've reached out to me. They said that they like my content, and they've provided me with a promo key. So at some point closer to Christmas, I will be doing a stream where I will be learning how to fly the drone in the conditions that are close to realistic, and we're going to be blowing up some Russians live in attempts to get more funds for Ukrainian armed forces. So stay up for that, guys. Trust in Ukraine, support the Ukrainian armed forces. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.